Jean-Luc Godard's Vivre Sa Vie is one of the key works of French New Wave cinema. Inspired by the epic theatre style of Bertolt Brecht, the film adopts the cinematically unusual structure of 12 tableaux that show elements of the life of its protagonist Nana. Clear gaps are left in the narrative for the spectator to fill in the absence of conventional exposition. This leaves key aspects of character motivation unexplained and much for the spectator to infer from the surface value the film presents. J'ai un autre, says Nana to an off-screen interrogator at one point. I am another, a quote from the poet Rimbaud. This prompts a fundamental element to consider in the context of Vivre Sa Vie as a piece of cinema, that a visual medium cannot reach the interior life of its subject, only explore the surface looking for clues. This is a key point for the arts in general, particularly the element of performance, and we may even go so far as to consider Nana's role as a sex worker, ostensibly giving her service to her clients, but reserving herself for herself, her life to live, as the title states. Furthermore, that character is performed by Godard's then wife Anna Karina. The New Wave was founded on the principle of the Auteur signature at the heart of filmmaking, and this personal relationship between filmmaker and actress, artist and muse, husband and wife, positions the spectator in an intimate and even intrusive space. This positional intimacy, contrasted with the denial of exposition, can be challenging. The film as a personal expression of the director was a new and exciting challenge to the general understanding of film as a studio commodity in the early 1960s. Experimental cinema is an appropriate label. Weren't the movies supposed to be fun and escapist? Instead, we are given a film that only offers questions, not assurances. Much of the film is shot in close-ups, including some entire scenes, and occasionally with breaks to the fourth wall. However, these close shots serve perhaps to emphasize their own inability to dig even deeper, to go beyond what only the figure in close-up reveals or, we might hope, lets slip. Godard shoots some scenes with a fixed stare, some with camera movement that explicitly defies narrative motivation or film grammar. Other scenes are framed with an unsettling approach to composition, too much space above a character's head, for instance. The diegetic sound often collides with intrusive background noise, while non-diegetic music repeats an unresolved phrase at odd intervals that seem to defy any clear dramatic purpose. In the context of Godard's wider filmography, these are elements that distinctly connect with his body of work through the decade. Yet there is also a progression in Godard's style here, and an evident desire not to repeat previous films. The jump cuts with which Godard made his name are kept to a minimum here, though of course when they do happen they are very notable indeed. While it is certainly a hugely experimental film that pushes the boundaries of what cinema can do or what audiences should expect, it also has some aspects that directly connect it to the work of other filmmakers. Godard did not create out of thin air. Firstly, some of the film's characteristics are also to be found in the work of his New Wave contemporaries, such as location shooting, natural lighting, and a marked defiance of petty bourgeois values. There is a nod to Louise Brooks's famous bob haircut from G.W. Pabst's Pandora's Box, and a few narrative comparisons to that film. More profoundly is the debt Godard owes to the great Carl Theodor Dreyer, and in particular Dreyer's Passion of Joan of Arc. Dreyer's film is characterized by a disregard of the conventions of shot-reverse shot, but still operates on a level that assumes the spectator is at least instinctively aware of this convention. Shot-reverse shot is used, at times conventionally, but frequently subverted when Dreyer cuts unexpectedly to a line of gaze that does not follow the previous shot in a logical way. As a result, the geography of the courtroom where much of the action takes place becomes kaleidoscopic, unfixed. As the judges interrogate Joan, we too are taken in close, very close, forced to witness her response as if seeking for signs of divinity or delusion, perhaps the jury to her judgment. Framing is often highly unusual, and the close-up dominates. These close-ups necessarily carve up the actor blocking, leaving the characters isolated in shots that emphasize their emotional or ideological separation, despite the physical proximity in each scene. Godard directly borrows these techniques. Vivre Sa Vie's opening title sequence engages the camera in a close staring competition. The three separate shots perhaps suggest police mugshots. That musical phrase plays each time, ends, leaving the shot to linger in silence. The opening scene proper is famously shot from behind, a deliberately frustrating position for us to witness, but we have already seen the character's face. The purpose here is not to conceal. At other points, the camera treats its subject as a suspect. The The actual police interrogation in Tableau 4 again positions us specifically as the one asking the questions. A difference is that Dreyer's Joan never breaks the fourth wall, while Nana does. In Godard's film, we are the judges. And who is it that breaks the fourth wall? Nana the character or Karina the actress? Given that Karina and Godard's artistic and real relationship runs over several films, and that the film blurs the distinctions between prostitution of the character and the artistic exploitation of a lover, those fourth wall breaks take on a liminal quality. In both films, the movement of tracking shots draws attention to itself. Dreyer's often woozy camera motion underlines the disorientating bursts of questions from different parts of the court, pressurizing Joan to buckle under the weight of her accusers. Godard's camera does something not entirely dissimilar at points. In the record shop, Nana's clearly dull routine is characterized by the camera crabbing left and right as she aids an unseen customer, before abandoning her to look out of the window. Perhaps to suggest that the street is beckoning her or inviting us to look away. The routine is dull, that's as much as we need to see. Moreover, the two film texts directly intertwine at two key points. In Tableau 3, Nana goes to the cinema to see the Dreyer film. Immediately, the Passion of Joan of Arc becomes a metatext, the film within the film. Though Vivre Sa Vie is far from the first film to have a sequence shot inside a cinema auditorium, this sequence draws a spectator's attention to the mechanics of cinema, particularly as the close-ups of Joan weeping are mirrored by unmistakably similar shots of Karina's tears. In doing this, Godard draws our attention to comparisons of shot composition between the film watched by Nana and by us. We cannot help but focus on the details of cinematography and the performance from Falconetti as Joan and Karina as Nana. That the feeling expressed is so vulnerable, a young female face in tears, provides us with an emotional and intellectual challenge. Where Dreyer has given us an extremely intimate image of religious ecstasy, Godard both amplifies this and oddly highlights the technique of the moment. The subtitle that bookends the shot of Nana repeats the word death. Is this a moment of insight? The cinema scene thus becomes a sequence that begs active spectatorship, by making us aware of the shot comparison from one text to another through unmistakable imitation. Does this enhance or negate the spectator's possible emotional response? We might, in the 21st century, consider both intertextuality and the Auteur signature as old hat, but in 1962, Godard was deliberately charting new territory. This is both characteristic of Godard the Auteur and in itself experimental. What I mean is that Godard had previously asked us to consider the movies within his work, with his debut Breathless working as both a deconstruction and homage to the American crime genre. Here, he goes further in constructing film as a palimpsest, overwriting one text with another. This is more than intertextuality, metafiction, or pastiche. The interconnectedness of the two texts is structural, thematic, contradictory, and cinematic calque. This asks the spectator to do a lot of work for what is a simple image, a big close-up of a tearful woman's face. A fundamentally moving spectacle amplified by the choice of shot, Nana becomes first the spectator within Vivre Sa Vie, then mirrors the protagonist of Joan of Arc, then follows her narrative trajectory towards her death. But something in the scene is absent. Where is the music that would conventionally aim to steer that response? We might say that a filmmaker that draws attention to a shot through an arch framing of itself as a construction is like a musician asking us to listen to a melody whilst being shown the notes on the page, not typically how things are done. But that melody is mute, presented in absolute silence in a way that a silent film was never shown to a paying audience. The scene revels in its own stark absence of sound. The silent film is Godard's, not Dreyer's. Godard has also added subtitles to Dreyer's film, not intertitles. He presents us with his version of the text. Also, what is this scene doing here? Nana has been taken out by an anonymous man. He is never framed enough for us to be able to recognise him again. It is also a strange date, even in 1962. The contrast between the barely glimpsed, perfunctory man and the big close-ups of Nana anticipates the later sequence, where Nana's prostitution becomes a routine of anonymous men, most of whom we barely see. In fact, with the framing of Paul from behind in Tableau 1 and the unseen male customer in the record shop, the face of Antonin Artaud's character in the Dreyer film is one of the few men in Vivre Sa Vie that we really get a proper look at. The others include Raoul the pimp and the philosopher Brice Perrin. Perrin has the distinction of being the only man in the film that doesn't seem to want something from Nana. Is he too somehow outside of Vivre Sa Vie's diegesis, like the Auteur figure? The Passion of Joan of Arc informs Godard in other ways. Tableau 12 sees the film shift from the voice of the director himself reading from Edgar Allan Poe's oval portrait, in itself a text in which the artist's close visual probing becomes remorseless and results in the death of its female subject, to a conversation reduced to silent speech with subtitles. The Dreyer film was unusual in 1929 as a silent film that approached a subject that most of us would consider to be properly only expressed through speech, and proving that such garrulous material could be conveyed through the silent medium. Deep into the sound era, Godard has no reason to imitate such a device other than in the spirit of pure experimentation. What we get is a film made in the 1960s, ironically imitating the earlier silent film when movie conventions were different. Conventions of the past have become the experimentation of the then present. The square aspect ratio of Godard's film is also a throwback to an earlier period. Remember also that Godard had added his own subtitles to Joan of Arc in the earlier scene. By returning to this device here, it is a purposeful callback to the earlier sequence in the cinema, and a hint that Nana's fate is soon to mirror Joan's. Structurally, the narratives of the two films have a clear parallel, tracing the oppression of a young woman to her death. Salvation is possible, but snatched away. The clear difference is that Joan's sacrifice ends with rioting and an emotionally charged climax. Nana's end is understated and senseless. Treated like a commodity and shot in a squabble, she is left in the street like litter. We can leave the debate about which fate is the more tragic for another time. One becomes a national martyr, the other a statistic. Finally, it is worth noting that Dreyer is not the only director who receives an overt textual reference. Godard's contemporary Francois Truffaut gets a cursory nod as the pimp's car drives past a cinema screening Jules et Jim, a film in which the lives of two men are defined by a strong-willed, free-spirited woman. Nana does not get to see that movie.